the rankings with a few notches higher or lower in the latest survey released this year. What will the survey results mean 3 months to Election Day? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama ko po from Manila online, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, and in Quezon City, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5. Ed Lingao of One News will be joining us later. Chiefs, happy Monday.
Hello, Robbie. Hi, Ami.
Good evening.
An eventful weekend, but before we get into that, I haven't actually tracked the numbers today and I'm curious, given all of the political activities, ano bang nakikita natin sa COVID, Ami?
Well, alert level 2 pa rin hanggang katapusan, but mababa yung cases natin, 2,700.
Yeah, the lowest this year.
The lowest this year. Although yung patay, yung death toll may 164, I think. So,
At
hindi
saka,
na dahil sa puro antigen na lang ang mga tao ngayon, hindi na nagte-testing.
but at the same time, now we're seeing a lot of these mammoth rallies sa Quezon City. Napakalaki nung rally, and there were other rallies by other candidates.
Well, yan din ang dahilan kung bakit alert level 2 pa rin daw, di ba? Oo, yan ang sinasite nilang dahilan kung bakit nagdadalawang isip sila na mag-alert level 1.
Because if there's anything that we've learned and that researchers keep reminding us over these past 2 years, it will take about 1 to 2 weeks for us to see kung ano yung epekto ng nangyari ngayon dito sa ano. But, speaking of rallies, that's one of the things na pag-uusapan natin. A lot of the supporters, particularly of Leni Robredo, woke up in a very good mood because of the pictures. Then they ended the day really on a downer because lumabas yung Pulse Asia survey showing a commanding lead still for Bongbong Marcos. But is it everything that we think it is, or are we missing certain things? These are the things we want to talk about today. And so let's start tonight with Attorney Tony Lavinia, former Dean of the Ateneo School of Government. Good evening. Welcome back, Dean Tony.
Good evening, Robbie. Good evening, Ami. Good evening, Lucy.
Okay, so Dean, I'll let you just go ahead and give us your take on the surveys and lead us into this discussion.
What's clear, regardless of the actual numbers, kasi at when it was taken, whether or not certain things were taken into account, like yung certainly this was before the survey period, the field work of the Pulse Asia was taken January 19 to 24, so that's certainly before the KBP. Nasa gitna na yan ng ongoing na siya nung nagkaroon ng Jessica Soho presidential interview. Forum, no? Regardless of that, it's clear naman na may commanding lead si Bongbong Marcos at this point in the race. Parang nothing has happened that has shook the race since the beginning, since the filing in October, or more precisely since the yung palagi ko naman sinasabi dyan, what explains the numbers, because these are Marcos loyalists and Duterte voters that have come together. And kahit na si President Duterte, at least in those early days of the filing, said very harsh words against Senator Marcos, parang walang effect siya. Mukha ding walang effect yung disqualification. Kahit na substantively sana may effect, di ba? Kasi imagine pinag-uusapan natin kung qualified ba yung isang tao na hindi nag-file ng income tax returns, di ba? That I thought that would have mattered. Also, wag na lang yung legal aspect dyan, yung political aspect lang siya na napag-uusapan on top of the mind ng mga tao, or parang wala din siyang parang wala din siyang effect. And ang explanation niya, again, very simple. Kailangan, I think, and for me, the explanation is not what Marcos is doing. Kasi granted, consistent naman yung ginagawa niya, di ba? Consistent yung messaging, very disciplined, unity, hindi kailangan magsabi ng detalye, di ba? Deny the past. That's very, very, very consistent yan ever since naman. But sa akin, it's really more what the other campaigns are not doing, di ba? Which is to target voters that are in the Marcos camp already. Kasi kailangan may pitch doon eh. May pitch ka kailangan. Target voters of each other. So parang walang naglilipat from the voters of Isko and Pacquiao and Lacson to Lenny and vice versa. Parang they're all like in their own bubble. Nakakatuwa when you go to I try to go to all the rallies in terms of following them as a political analyst. Yung sinasabi mo, Robbie, na grabing high na high sila sa
rally, sa proclamation.
Rally. Ganon din ang mga supporters ni Isko. Ganon din ang mga supporters ni Pacquiao when they're there. Kasi thousands naman talaga na doon. Di ba?
Pero,
let me
bring it back, Dean. Ay nga, kung essentially wala naman nagbago talaga in terms of issues, developments. I was talking to Executive Director Tabunda of Pulse Asia kanina. Sabi niya, this having happened on the eve really of the Jessica Soho debates KBP, that's the one that really threw in really a new element, no? Yung Marcos Duwag, kita mo kumakagat yon. I mean, even anecdotally you could feel that this is something that's being talked about. But given na wala namang nagbago, how should the different campaigns look at this other than, well, we just bought the Marcos campaign even more time, or at least we wasted even more time, because by the time the next survey comes out, it will be the middle of March already.
Yeah, tricky talaga. And tricky kung maghintay ka na magkamali si Marcos, di ba? Because Robbie, I just want to say this and to all the other campaigns. Huwag nyo silang i-underestimate kasi magaling sila. Magaling ang kampanya, di ba? Magaling talaga. Di ba? I mean, if it's true na it's Liza Araneta Ross that's doing this, hanga talaga ako. If it's someone else, I'd hanga din ako. Di ba? I mean, we just have to praise them for that and not underestimate them in all levels of their campaign. So dapat wag mag-asa na magkamali sila kasi hindi yun ang solusyon. Ang solusyon is ano yung sa kampanya mo ang kailangan mong gawin. Di ba?
Yun na nga. So ako, more to the point, what are they not doing?
For example, I will say this. They are not appealing to the youth vote. Sinasabi natin, di ba? Sinasabi natin, majority of the voters are youth. Depending on what you call youth. Kung 18 to 40, definitely majority yon. Kung 18 to 30, plurality yon ng voters, di ba? But if you were a young voter, and look at all of these candidates, they do not appeal to me as a young voter. They will appeal to me as a Bicolano, Ilocano, Mindanaon, as a human, even whatever I'm inclined to, di ba? But not as a young voter. Wala naman nag-uusap dyan ng education lang. You have to remember Miriam Defensor Santiago, di ba? Corruption lang. That galvanized the young voter in 1992. So none of the campaign is doing that, di ba? Ito, malaking area na pwede mong baguhin sana. Metro Manila, na right now, di ba, parang solidly with Marcos, but wala rin tayo nakikita nag-a-appeal dun sa mga candidates sa even Isko Moreno na you would have thought na kilala niya yung Metro Manila. He is generalist. All the campaigns are generalist. Hindi sila nag-a-appeal to specific votes that might be convertible pa. Diba?
Yeah, but I mean, but it's the same question for Bongbong Marcos. What exactly is Bongbong Marcos saying or doing that specifically appeals to the young? I mean, his platform is yun. Ganun din di ba?
Naka-lead na siya kasi, di ba? He doesn't have to do that kasi naka-lead na siya.
Okay.
Naka-secure na siya ng ano. And yung secure niya, ang Marcos vote, simple lang. It's Marcos and Duterte loyalists, period. Di ba?
Okay.
That's 50% of the country.
But you said they also appeal to the young. Sabi mo, siya yung kandidato who appeals to the young. Anong appeal niya sa young?
Hindi. Yung kay Marcos, ang appeal niya is 50%, di ba?
Yes.
That's 25% Marcos and that's 25% Duterte. Now, as the campaign moves on, kaya maabot siguro ng 60%, kasi yung imagery ni Marcos, doon sila magaling, di ba? The imagery this is the irony of it all, di ba? Marcos is in fact kumbaga
The unifier.
But also di ba? The irony is
The history of the family,
yung
yeah.
representative ng political elite, di ba? Yung talagang all the political families, 90% of the politicians' dynasties are with him. But siya yung change agent according to the voters. Di ba? That's only because of imagery. Imagery yun.
Hindi yun talaga ang gusto ng mga tao natin kasi it's actually part of our culture, yung mga dynasty. At saka yung merong may nag-aalaga sa mga tao. Ito si congressman namin, yung mayaman sa lugar namin. Asikasuhin ako neto, bibigyan ako neto ng trabaho. Pag nanalo yung kandidato nila, hindi ba? Don't you think yun talaga yung loyalist base? No?
Well, Marcos represents that, di ba? And so, to the extent that people are already comfortable with that, pupunta sila kay Marcos. Pero ang Marcos is also the change agent for people. Siya ang magbabago. Isa sa mga, isa din sa natin, di ba? Yung sa tingin ko, hindi underestimate din itong unity, invocation ng unity, no? Sa totoo lang, that also appeals to the non-partisan voter na pagod na sa away-away, pagod na sa di ba, investigasyon dito, yung gusto lang nila na yung ganung klase, kahit na alam naman natin, that's the irony, kasi alam naman natin na Marcos is probably the most divisive candidate and will not bring us unity even when he wins, di ba? Even the positions that he takes are very divisive, di ba? Sa China, sa peace process, sa human rights, they're all very divisive. Hindi siya kakaisa. But sa kampanya, diba? Sabi ko nga, why did the other candidates allow Marcos to be the unity candidate, di ba? And sila yung divisive candidate. You have to ask yourself that question in order to recalibrate, di ba? Ang gusto ko rin sabihin din dito na hindi pa naman tapos, di ba? May 45 days. 45 days, hindi 90 days, ha? Because you really only have up to Holy Week to change this. Kung hindi pa nakahabol, kahit 10 points behind na lang. Kung ganito pa rin, 30 to 40
that's the
points.
first week of April.
Yes.
So you're saying, I know that the question of many people right now is, ano ba to? Game over na ba to?
Hindi, but it will be game over on April 10, like after Holy Week, if in fact ganito pa rin ang numbers na pinag-uusapan natin. 30-40 point spread, di ba? Hindi, tas wag silang mag-underestimate ulit ng lead kasi sinasabi nila palagi, ganito naman si Grace mo, ganito naman si Bina, ganito naman Pinoy and Villar at this point, ganito pa naman sila. Don't say that because this is the highest lead ever in our history of election surveys.
Now, Dean Tony, what else can you tell the other campaigns? We're all talking about the headline numbers, of course, with Bongbong Marcos, the numbers of the top of the five presidential candidates, maybe six, and so on. But as you dive deeper into the Pulse Asia survey, are there any straws there to grasp?
Well, Metro Manila is one, di ba? I think may movement sa Metro Manila, although mas isko yun nag-move kaysa but Metro Manila is I think is still up for grabs, no? And it's a second or third biggest region, I think, no? I think Southern Tagalog is not necessarily completely Cebu is certainly not completely still in so those are three of the biggest regions, di ba? And then of course across the board yung youth vote is wala tayong hindi na yung youth vote masyado, di ba? And the kind of surveys that we have do not really capture that too much kasi ang kinakapture na naman voting age and also so that it's not captured very well, but given their numbers and your ability to reach them, yun ang bibigyan ko ng tutok siguro.
Meron pa bang Catholic Church vote? Meron pa ba nun? Kasi dati, di ba, yun ang Yun din ang hinahabol lagi ng mga kandidato. Does that really have any effect now on the vote?
It depends on whether merong effect for when there are leaders, Catholic leaders, especially bishops and priests that will take a stand, di ba? Very clear stand. But what is not clear is whether or not you will have enough of them all over the country, di ba? Will you even have a majority of bishops do that? Di ba? Kita mo din naman sa laity, you already saw di ba? Mike Velarde, El Shaddai, that's a big Catholic bloc. Although that's also not very disciplined like INC would be
Not
disciplined.
block voting, eh. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I would humbly say not to expect, di ba, the Catholic hierarchy in toto to say that. It's not just in their character to do that, di ba, historically. Pwede silang magsabi actually na yung isang kandidato ayaw namin. But not by name. They will say why that candidate, pero we will know who that is, no? Etc. But that will not help a specific candidate because it will only be against one candidate and not necessarily endorse other candidates.
Okay. Professor Tony Laviña, maraming salamat po. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
And we'll take a break. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Mic test, mic test.
Okay na.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back to the Chiefs here on One News. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. I'm still with Luchi Cruz Valdez, Ami Pamintuan, and now joining us in the studio, Ed Lingao, and also joining us, Pulse Asia President, Professor Ronald Holmes. Professor Holmes, welcome once again to the Chiefs.
Good evening, sir.
Evening, Professor.
Good evening, sir.
Ganda gabi, happy Valentine.
Happy
Happy
Valentine's, Professor Holmes. Kahit na marami kayong binad trip, Professor Holmes, asking for a friend ba lang ha? Kailangan ba raw kahapon din labas yung survey?
Well, kadalasan hindi kami namimili ng araw, pero normally sa punto na alam namin na yung aming survey ay tama ang lahat ng numero, nilalabas kaagad. Hindi yan kung weekday o weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, so napagpasyahan na yon yung release dates. Let's get into the content again. Just a quick briefer again for people. What are the important contexts for the voter preferences at that in the days around January 24 and prior to that?
Well, ang mga importante doon siguro, meron kang mga kagalawan sa pagitan ng mga kandidato. Although hindi ganun ka laganap yung kanilang gawain kasi nga nung pagsimula nung taon ay biglang pumalo ulit yung COVID-19 cases. Yung isang division ng COMELEC ay nagdesisyon na i-dismiss yung disqualification case laban kay Bongbong Marcos. Yun ang maaaring isa sa mga kaganapan bago ginawa yung survey.
Sir, at the same time, can you speak to us about how soft or how hard are these preferences of these survey respondents? Gaano kapirme, gaano nakasolid ang kanilang choice?
Well, hindi ganun kapirme. Kung titignan natin, hindi lamang sa survey na ito, pero ng mga nakaraang namin survey, maraming pagbabago sa voting decision ng mga botante habang lumalapit ang eleksyon. Noong 2010 na nag-exit poll kami, nung tinanong namin sila kung kailan sila nagdesisyon kung sinong boboto nilang pagpangulo, kailan sila nagpirme ng kanilang desisyon kung sinong boboto ng Pangulo, lumalabas na ito yung naggawa lamang parang less than a month before the election. So, ibig sabihin, maaari pang magbago ang kanilang voting decision ngayon. Sa mga katanungan na magbabago ba ang kanilang boto, halos kalahati ng mga botante nagsasabing maaari itong magbago o hindi na masabi kung magbabago o hindi magbabago.
So it's still quite fluid, no? Kasi natatandaan ko noong 2016, nag-umpisang mag-surge si President Duterte, mga after na nung debate, mga around yung debate na ng TV5 eh. Yung
sa TV5.
Kung siya nag-surge actually. So ngayon, well, since we're talking about debates, yung sinasabi kanina ni Barry Gonzales, spokesperson ni VP Robredo, yan daw survey nyo, hindi pa masyadong na-cover yung period na nagkaroon ng controversy over the debate ni Jessica Soho na tinanggihan ni Bongbong Marcos. Saka doon nag-umpisa yung trending ng Bongbong Duwag. I'm sorry to say that. Pero doon nag-umpisa. Tama ba yung yung pag-picture niya nung event na yon na medyo late na yung survey? I know it happened 19 to 24, no? 20 yung survey. Tama ba yung perception nila doon?
Tama yun kasi unang-una nung ginawa yung Jessica Soho, yung naganap yung Soho interview sa 22nd, so ibig sabihin nahagip lang niya yung huling 2 araw ng aming fieldwork. So yung huling 2 araw na yon, kung ating tatansyahin ay hindi maliit na lang na proporsyon ng fieldwork, ng interview ang dapat matapos. At maaari yung mga na-interview nung huling 2 araw, hindi pa nila masyadong ganap na nakuha kung ano nangyari doon sa Soho interview. At yung kung ano man yung feedback sa hindi pagsipot o pagtanggi na ma-interview ang dating senador, no, na si Bongbong Marcos.
Sir?
Across the region, okay, ako ang tanong ko, ano kaya ang mga factors naman na nagpababa kahit bahagya ng numbers ni Lenny, no? And all the other contenders, kasi marami nagsasabi na yung yung pagbatikos kay BBM at yung pagsampa ng disqualification case actually worked in his favor. Is that something that can be gleaned from the survey somehow?
Lucy, una, siguro liwanagin ko lang, hindi naman bumaba ang voting support ni Vice President Lenny. Kasi from survey to survey, within the margin of error, itong kanyang voting preference. No?
I see.
Kumbaga borderline significant.
Insignificant, yeah.
Hindi natin masabi kung yung disqualification case ay nakatulong o kay Bongbong Marcos. Ang sasabi lang natin ay nasa balita yan. At ang balita ay malaki ang influensya niyan. Maaring malaki influensya niyan doon sa voting decision ng mga botante, no? Sa decision ng mga botante. Kung ang balita ay paborable sa isang kandidato, balikan lang natin, nangyari noong 2016, noong Desyembre, medyo bumaba noon yung voting support for then candidate Grace Poe. Nung pagdating ng January ay nadesisyonan na Supreme Court, medyo umakyat ulit yung voting support kay Grace Poe. So ganun yung influensya ng balita. Pag ang isang desisyon ay paborable sa isang kandidato, posible na makatulong to na iangat yung kanyang suporta. Pero kung hindi paborable, maaring ito yung makapagpababa ng suporta sa isang kandidato.
Hey, Dr. Holmes, when you look at the survey report, there are a number of things there. For example, it's not just first choice, mayroong second choice, pwedeng maglaro yung utak ng mga tao in terms of scenario building for their candidates. But yung bang survey nyo, tiningnan din, ano bang hinahanap ng mga botante in terms of values and characteristics and programs for that matter?
Well, yeah, meron kami mga katanungan na nandoon sa survey na ang tanong dyan ay ano bang issue na sa palagay nila ang dapat bigyan pansin ng isang kandidato. Lumalabas na usapin doon talaga ay mataas na presyo ng mga bilihin pa rin. Tungkol sa mga katangian na hinahanap nila, halo-halo, no? Unang-una rito yung pagiging malinis ang kanilang reputasyon, walang bahid. Kumbaga, isa sa 4 kung di ako nagkakamali sa mga survey na amin sinagawa kasama itong survey na ito. Nagsasabi na ito yung mahalagang katangian na kanilang hinahanap sa isang kandidato. May kaalaman, may record sa pamamahala, yun yung lumalabas sa pangalawa. At may nagawa, yun yung isa pang tampok na kadahilanan na binabanggit ng mga botante.
Okay.
In the history of polls, meron na bang survey results na ganito kalaki? No, majority nga sinasabi, no? And many political, scientists are saying Marcos seems to be the first to actually get a majority, even in the surveys. Do your surveys now actually validate this?
Well, pinakmataas siya sa aming mga nasagawang surveys, the highest that we've recorded in the pre-election surveys we conducted for presidential elections since 2004. So it's the highest. And the highest we had in the past was, I think, 45% for then candidate Noynoy Aquino that was posted sometime in 2015, right after he threw his hat in the presidential race.
What about the lead? Ganon din?
The lead is also quite, it's the biggest gap between the first and the second running candidate. If I can recall, we have not had a gap that big, largely because we did not have someone recording majority preference, pre-election preference in the past.
Malaking factor ba yung nahahati? Actually, siya lang yung representative nung identified with the administration, no? Because of Sara, despite his, yung mga early attack sa kanya ni President Duterte. Pero actually, siya lang yung kandidato na identified na with the administration. Yung iba, naghahati-hati dun sa, yung non-administration. Is that a factor? Are you analyzing that aspect?
Well, yeah, I mean, bahagi yun. It might be one factor that he's generating support from people who are supportive of the administration since he is in tandem with the Duterte. Despite the fact that, belatedly there were personal attacks that have been leveled against him by the president himself. The fact is that they have been allied with Duterte for the past more than 5 years, and the family's name has been rehabilitated by the mere fact that the president allowed the burial of the late dictator in the libingan ng mga bayani.
Sir,
What
I'll
about
ask
in
you.
terms of, go ahead, Ed.
Okay. Sir, I'll ask you the same question I asked you a while ago in the other program, pero I'd like to drill down some more. We were talking about swing votes a while ago, the possible swing votes of around half. What are the chances, or what's the likelihood of these swing votes going to the opposite side of the political fence? Is there any way to measure that? Or will voters, if they ever do swing, will they go for somebody in the middle ground?
Well, yung notion kasi ng swing votes, basically, it's hard to measure in the case of the Philippines because we don't really have partisan affiliation. Right? Sa ibang bansa, kunyari, Democrat, Republican, and then yung nasa gitna. So,
Cut and dried, no?
sa atin sa survey namin, pag tinatanong namin, may pinapaboran ba kayong partido, swerte ka na kung isa sa 10 ang magsasabing meron. At kadalasan, pag tinanong mo, yung nagsabing, oo, may pinapaboran, sinong partido, sabihin na, well, yung partido ni Mayor Juan de la Cruz. So, ang hirap...
Sa dami ng mga partido, daming bago, hindi mo na nga alam eh.
Ang hirap sukatin, no? Ngayon, ang alam ko sa mga pag-aaral, batay sa mga nakaraang eleksyon, ang lumalabas ng pangunahing pamantayan, the primary variable that would explain voting behavior would be ethno-linguistic. That means the identification of a particular voters towards a candidate who belongs to the same ethno-linguistic group. So Raul Loco, for example, did quite well the first time he ran for the presidency when he got more than 80% of the Bicolano votes. At least that's based on pre-election surveys. So you would expect Bicolanos to support, let's say, the sole Bicolano candidate. That's Leno Robredo now. You can expect people who are Ilocanos to more or less support Bongbong Marcos, right? In the 2016 elections, we saw how Visayans basically supported Rodrigo Duterte. And Nilan Defensor got a sizable support from Ilonggos and Warais also. So that's ethno-linguistic, but that's the largest ethno-linguistic group would be the Tagalogs, and they're quite diffuse.
Di ba? Ilan yung kandidato from the Tagalog region si Pini Lacson, si Isko Moreno, di ba?
Yeah.
And then of course si Bongbong Marcos, actually is Metro Manila din yan, malakas din yan sa Metro Manila.
Yeah.
So hatid siya.
So ang pinangmalaki pagkatapos ng Tagalog, the Tagalogs will constitute about 45%. Yung Cebuano, Visayans,
Mas Bisaya, yeah.
50%. But that's a group that will basically go towards, let's say, Sara Duterte or Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah.
And Bongbong's association with Sara Duterte may actually draw more support from that particular ethno-linguistic group. So yun yung mahirap dun sa swing, Ed, no? Ami, Lucy, Robby. Ang hirap natin sukatin, ang alam ko lang, mga Pilipino, pag bumoto sila, hindi malinaw sa kanila kung dahil ito may pareho silang ideolohiya, hindi. May isang usapin na gusto nilang tugunan at itong dapat na gawin.
But,
I understand, sir. Pero sir, in this particular case kasi you're looking at two poles two opposite poles They may not have ideologies per se, pero they do represent opposing poles of the political spectrum. Not ideology, pero diba, what's the likelihood of, for example, BBM supporters who are somewhere in the middle moving over to the Robredo camp and vice versa?
But the question there, Ed, is whether they're seen by the voters as poles apart, right? Or whether the voters look at them as individual candidates, and individual candidates tend to appeal to more voters than the others.
Yeah.
So, hindi naman to battle between administration and opposition. Of course, it is being cast as a battle between, let's say, the dark or the good forces. But again, do voters see these clear lines, black and white?
Prof, ako lalo ko pang Prof, ako, dadaling ko pa sa lalong mas mababaw pa na usapin. Winnability or even a sense of inevitability. Does that factor into how people decide and how early they decide?
Well, in our surveys, and Robbie, we've had this in the past, even the winnability is not so much a factor that influences voting decision. And it may even be canceled out by the fact that there are some people who are supportive of a candidate that may not be leading in the surveys, would eventually take an extra effort or engage in will exert more effort in terms of bringing up that support base for the candidate that they favor. So we don't see that. And I don't think that that's something that should be even thought of at this point, even if you have someone who's got majority support in the January survey.
Nabanggit
Professor,
niyo
yung iba daw na surveys, parang ang intention is to create a bandwagon effect. That's according to the Commission on Elections, no? And COMELEC, sabi nga nila, they might issue guidelines that will effectively regulate, magkakaroon ng konting regulation ng surveys. Ano po yung tingin nyo doon sa suggestion na yan o sa plano na yan ng COMELEC?
We'll wait for the guidelines. We have been compliant with all the COMELEC regulations. There are Supreme Court decisions that basically uphold the right to information, more specifically related to survey. The Supreme Court has decided in the past that it is unconstitutional to ban the publication of surveys. There's a Supreme Court decision that binds us as survey organizations to be transparent about our questions. And whether we are conducting commission surveys, we have to tell them who is commissioning. So, and we have adhered to this regulation. So we'll just wait for what are the new regulations on the part of the Commission on Elections.
What about those?
Yeah, itong latest ninyo, kasi sinabi sa amin ng SWS, medyo hirap, well, hindi SWS, kundi nag-commission the SWS. Sinabi, medyo nahirapan daw last month because of the Omicron surge na medyo na-delay nga daw yung inyong survey. Kumusta yung mechanics ng pag-survey ninyo? In January, that was the height of the Omicron surge actually.
Compared to our earlier surveys, noong September 2020, nagsimula ulit kami ng face-to-face survey. Yun ang talagang medyo may kahirapan kasi unang-una, hindi pa bakunado yung mga nag-i-interview namin. Pangalawa, talagang kinakailangan nag-adhere kami doon sa health protocol. May dalang mask, may dalang face shield, binibigyan yung interviewee ng mask at face shield. Netong nakaraang survey, hindi na ganun kalaki ang hirap dahil sa karamihan ng mga interviewee mismo ay bakunado na. Lahat ng aming interviewer ay bakunado na, iba'y naka-booster na. At medyo sanay na doon sa health protocol na aming inilagay simula noong September 2020.
So, Prof, given all of that, when will the next survey come out?
Well, we're doing a survey every month. So until the election days, that's one on February, another one in March, and the next one in April.
But that means that what? We're expecting the next results around mid-March, which basically gives us, after lumabas yun, assuming na may magbago, we're still basically looking at just 1.5 months for the narrative to be defined or redefined.
Yep.
Ako gusto ko magtanong sa Senate survey. No? I know that everybody's watching the presidential survey, but I'm curious, pagdating ba sa choice of senators, nagkikick in din ba yung ethno-linguistic preferences or hindi na?
Meron siya, meron siyang additional value. Pero dyan talaga, ang lumalabas dyan ay yung pagiging brand, pagiging popular.
So popularity na yan, yeah.
Ang isang additional element na may advantage, ang ilan ay yung association with the institution, yung dating senador.
Right.
Pero pag tinignan mo, Lucy, kung sino nangunguna ngayon, hindi naman dating senador, di ba? Kasamahan nyo sa pagpapahayag.
I know.
So, yun ang lumalabas. Meron kang additional push pag ikaw ay identified with the institution, pero popularity at differentiation ang isa. Kinakailangan kinikilala ka bilang kaiba doon sa tumatakbo kasi multiple winner competition naman tayo.
Tsaka yung name recall, parang malakas pa rin, ano? Dahil si Jinggoy Estrada at saka si Jamie Estrada ang ginamit. Nandun no? It's na JV Ejercito. Parang andun pa rin yung Estrada. Pasok no?
Yeah, yun ang lumalabas dito at medyo may kahirapan. Pag tingnan mo yung mga pumasok, ang kanilang awareness ay universal, umaabot sa 100%, di ba?
Yes.
So pag hindi ka masyadong kakilala, ay medyo mas mahirap tumakbo sa pagkasenador. Kasi single constituency pero national. Hindi ito laban ng konsehal na maliit yung distrito mo. This is a national constituency, a multi-winner competition, and it's really required that you are known and you're competing against people who are really nationally prominent.
Tsaka dito wala talagang partido siguro, no? I mean, I'm sure may association ba with a political party?
Luchi, even when they get into the Senate, the parties are just simply just a label. It doesn't define who is the majority or the minority. Yeah. Even senators behave in such an atomistic fashion, so you do not expect them to align themselves with parties when they run for the Senate.
Hey, Prof, paano nagpapasa? Nabanggit nyo nga, it takes up until the final weeks bago magpirme, bago magpasa yung mga botante. So all of these few months before we get to that phase, we'd like to think, however you describe this mode, still open, reviewing, thinking, and so on, saan kumakalap ng impormasyon at paano nila binubuo yung impormasyon? What influences still the voters at this stage?
Well, ang primary source of information lumalabas television pa rin, Robby, no? Pumapangalawa dyan ang internet, pangatlo dyan yung mga kapamilya, kamag-anak, mga kaibigan, at sumusunod lamang yung radyo. Although sa mga probinsya, pumapangalawa pa rin yung radyo. Ang pinakmalaking impluwensya siguro sa pagboto, batay na rin sa pag-aaral sa Pilipinas at sa ibang bansa, yung nakakadirektang impluwensya sa kanila. At dito pumapasok yung mga kapamilya, no? Kamag-anak, mga malalapit na kaibigan. So yun yung maaari makapagbago din ng kanyang isipan. Pero yung mismong mindset, yung desisyon ng isang family member o kaibigan ay na-influensya sa nakukuha nila sa media. At malaki pa rin yung papel ng television at lumalabas ngayon, talagang umuungos yung papel ng social media.
But you're speaking of family not as a value, but that family members as media as well for information.
Yes. There's basically sources of information. The family and relatives and friends as sources of information about the elections and about the candidates.
That's going both older and younger. In other words, the younger will listen to the older, the elders will listen to the younger. Makikinig sa pinsan, or is there a hierarchy of influence within family?
It's hard for me to say because we have not done into probing as to whether we're still basically hierarchical. The older ones are the ones that dictate on the younger ones. But we can just simply say that family members and relatives and friends are sources of information that influence the voting decision of voters.
Demographically, sabi kasi kanina ni Dean Lavinia, no, na wala raw tumatarget sa youth. Pero I just want to know, what do the surveys say about how the demographic votes are shaping? Where do the youth votes go or tend toward, as opposed to, sabihin na natin, medyo senior votes?
Yung mga thunders. Basically, sa amin kasi ang age group the youth will be 18 to 24, right? In our case, although some of them would say that you go up to 40 years old, but let's say just strictly the 18 to 24 age group, we don't see that much of a variance. The way that they divide their voting decision is similar to what we see at the national level. And there's no variance also across age groups. Hindi ibig sabihin yung mas matanda hindi bumoboto doon sa nangunguna. Hindi na iiba yung boto kay Bongbong, kay BP Robredo, regardless of age group. Ang pagkakahati ng boto sa age group halos pare-pareho. pumapasok ka doon sa katanungan, meron ba talagang youth vote? Meron bang women's vote? Ang kaalaman ko bilang political scientist, we don't have an electorate to begin with. An electorate that's conscious of their identity, an electorate that's conscious of the issues that they feel candidates or elected officials should address. That's the problem that we have in the Philippines. That wala tayong electorate. The main reason for that is because of the way that our elections are, our electoral rules are really set out. It's really more personality oriented. It's a first past the post.
Hindi siya issues-based. Kasi yun ang
Hindi.
sinasabi nun ni Senator Kiko Pangilinan na he's hoping kasi milyon-milyon yung nag-register na bagong botante. Sabi niya, typically daw, the youth vote, yung ganong kabatang vote, usually anti-establishment, meaning mukhang non-administration. Tama ba yung perception niya yan? May basis ba yun?
Well, meron sigurong youth vote na ganun, no? In some universities, for example, I've seen the mock polls lang in universities. They tend to reflect a different voting pattern from the ones that we see in the surveys. But you know, those are private universities. Those are exclusive universities. I don't know whether the state universities and colleges would have the same results, right? Yung SUCs, because you know, I don't see the polls done for the SUCs. Nonetheless, pag sinabi mong youth, 18 to 24, ilan dyan ang nasa pamantasan, ilan dyan ang nagtatrabaho na, ilan dyan ang walang trabaho at wala sa paaralan. At ano ang proportion niyan at sinong kanyang binuboto. Without disaggregating it, we know that the 18 to 24 age group tend to divide their voting decisions the same way that other age groups do.
Okay.
There is no differentiation.
Professor Holmes, we're almost out of time, but balikan ko lang po yung sinabi niya. So we're expecting the next survey around mid-March, hopefully earlier. But what's safe to say right now that once you write that report, kung ano man yung resulta, what are clearly new factors and new contexts that will be included in voter preferences by mid-March?
Well, kasama dyan, Robby, siguro yung ginawa nila sa kampanya simula February 8 hanggang bago kami magsagawa ng field work. So yun yung bagay na makaka-influensya sa makukuha namin sa survey ngayong buwan na ito.
Okay. Professor Ronald Holmes, President po ng Pulse Asia. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Salamat, sir.
Ingat, sir.
That's all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez, News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.